It's time for Comeback Sports with Brandon, the Coach Perry, and Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty. Here we go.
What's happening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Comeback Sports. We got 10 sports topics for you this week, as we always do. I am Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty. I'm joined by my partner, as always, Brandon, the Coach Perry. Brandon, how you doing this week, pal?
Pat, I'm doing pretty good today, having a great day, and looking to continue it with a great show. Let's just keep this ball rolling.
Yeah, as usual, we talk about the month of April being crazy with sports, and it continues to carry on. We got 10 sports topics, a lot of different sports and different parts of the sports world we're going to get into tonight. But first off, before we get going, folks, as you can see at the bottom of the screen right there, our Twitter handles. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. We tweet out the links every single week of what topics we're going to be covering and the link itself to our YouTube page. And if you're watching us on YouTube right now, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And that'll help us as you will join us as one of our subscribers. And we'll make sure we'll mention your YouTube username if you subscribe to us, and then make a comment and let us know which number subscriber you are. So if you're number 32 or something like that, then let us know you're subscriber number 32. This is your subscriber name. We'll make sure to give you a shout out in the next show. But to start off tonight, our topic number one is going to be out of the NBA, and Jamal Murray, the point guard for the Denver Nuggets, obviously their second best player overall behind Nikola Jokic, tore his ACL the other night. He is out for the season. This is a massive blow to the Denver Nuggets, Brandon.
Yeah, we're talking about a big hit to really one of the better teams in the Western Conference right now, a team that was definitely going to be in the playoffs and in playoff contention, and they still will be, but now without one of their best players, and so it's going to be a hit. And I think, looking forward, can they compete with some of the other teams in the West now without basically their number one scorer and their number one energy guy with Jamal Murray? And we're talking about really, I think this is a guy that kind of flies under the radar for most NBA fans, but he is really one of the better NBA players out there. He can light it up. He can drop 40 on you without you even looking, without you even knowing. He can hit from any spot on the court. So we're talking about a guy that can shoot from the logo, but can also take you down low or attack the basket. He's just got a really great all-around game, and he's a pretty good defender too. So we're really talking about some really good minutes, good points that the Denver Nuggets are going to be missing going forward. And obviously, it's still good to have Nikola Jokic there, who is really one of the best centers in the NBA, in my opinion. I'd love to see, obviously, maybe the Celtics try to make a play for a player like that, but Denver Nuggets are not going to shop a player like that because Nikola Jokic is so good. And when you have both these guys on the court, it's just kind of like, hey, just let them do their thing because they are so good. And I think the Denver Nuggets have kind of got to see that over the last few years. But yeah, I think this is a big injury for this team going forward. Definitely hurts their title contention. And we're going to have to see who's going to step up on their roster. As we know, once somebody goes down on a roster, we need somebody to step up. So it's really who's going to be that next guy up. That's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing with Denver right now is that, they have a pretty deep team. They have guys like Will Barton, and they have some other players that are very good players and not necessarily stars that could fill the void a little bit. Michael Porter Jr. has developed as a player. He came out of college. He had a bad injury. It's taken him some time to get going here in the NBA, but very good scorer. So, I think they can kind of make up the scoring punch there. They're, I think, fourth in the West right now. So I don't think they're going to drop out of the playoffs or anything like that. They have Jokic, who is he might be the top candidate for MVP now that Embiid's had some decent injuries and LeBron has as well. Him and Giannis are probably right there. But, so I think they'll make the playoffs, but they cannot win the title without Jamal Murray. I mean, I think that's pretty simple. There's no way that they can go into a playoff series with, a team like the Clippers, who seem to be sort of hitting their stride now. The Jazz, who have been one of the best teams in the NBA all year. Phoenix has such a good backcourt now. I mean, I just don't think they can hang with those teams in a playoff series if Jamal Murray is hurt, which he is now. So I think it'll be really tough for them to make any type of playoff run. They'll still make the playoffs, but losing him with a torn ACL, that ruins their title hopes. And they also, obviously, were going for the title this year when they made that trade for Aaron Gordon. He's another guy that can help you out scoring, but he's not a guy that's going to take over scoring for a game. And even Jokic, Jokic takes over a game. He does everything out on the floor, but there can be times where you can neutralize a big man like that, and he's going to pass out of double teams and everything like that. But you need another guy to kind of take over the scoring if Jokic isn't the one that night. And, like I said, Michael Porter Jr. might be one of those guys, but they don't really have that kind of player to kind of tandem with Jokic in a big playoff series after this torn ACL by Jamal Murray.
Yeah, no, to highlight your point, I believe Jokic had like a triple-double a few weeks ago, and I think he only had like 15 points with the triple-double. But he's just one of those players that can do it all, but he's not going to drop 40 or 50 like Jamal Murray can on any given night. And I guess really Jamal Murray is also one of those guys where he's just guaranteed buckets, guaranteed numbers, guaranteed digits. We're talking a guy that's just going to get guaranteed 25 plus a night every time he steps on the court. So this is definitely a big drop that they're going to have to fill. And as a coach, you're looking, okay, where can I fill these minutes on offense and defense? And who's going to step up, like I said? And is it going to be a multitude of guys? Are we going to have to play a couple of guys to try to fill in these minutes? Or is it going to be one big guy that comes in, or are we going to give Aaron Gordon more minutes in the small forward section, So it's really one of those things where as a coach, you're going to have to look to fill this void, obviously. But as a fan, we're missing out on one of the better NBA players and really one of the more exciting NBA players to watch. So it's really disappointing going forward. And obviously, this is one of those big injuries that is going to take usually over a year to recover from. And you normally don't see guys getting back to full speed until over a year plus. You do have those occasional guys like an Adrian Peterson who rehabs in like 6-7 months and comes back looking just sharp. But and we're hoping to see Odell and Saquon come back like that really, really soon. But it is a big injury. And so we're definitely prayers up to Jamal Murray, and hopefully he can recover from this fast. But yeah, the Denver Nuggets are going to be missing out on a big scoring threat day in and day out. Moving on to topic number 2, and that's another guy. Another guy that's, another young NBA superstar that everybody loves to watch, and we're talking about Luka.
Yeah, that's right. Luka Doncic, one of the rising stars in the NBA. He's already, I think, a top 10 player. Certainly will be even next season if he's not right now. And he's going to be one of the top players in the NBA over the next couple of seasons. But one of the things that he was talking about this week is that he doesn't see the point in this play-in tournament for the NBA playoffs this upcoming season. So, I'm sure a lot of people, if you watch the NBA in the bubble, they had the play-in tournament for the final seed. They had a couple of teams that were neck and neck with the record and were fighting for a playoff position. And then, I know like Bill Simmons of The Ringer and some other people have always talked about a play-in tournament for the last couple of seeds. So they're actually trying it this year. And what it's going to be is the 7 and 8 seed will play each other. And the winner of that game will get into the playoffs. Then the loser of that game will then play the winner of the 9 and 10 game. And then the loser of 9 and 10 will be knocked out. And then the winner of 9 and 10 will play the loser of the 7 and 8. So it's sort of like those type of games. I think it's 6 games between the two conferences altogether. So, it's a new way for the NBA to kind of bring some excitement to, the last couple of seeds in the playoffs. And it's also, I think, because this season is shortened, even though it's only shortened, I can't remember. I think it's like 12 less games this year or something like that. Because I think they're going to try to get in 70 because of the pandemic, that they're trying to, give a few more teams a chance because the season was shortened. Luka's saying, if you're the 7th seed, you've earned that 7th seed, then you get into the play-in tournament. If you have 2 bad games and you're out, what's the point of the rest of the regular season? So, I think that I get his point. I like the play-in tournament style. I think this is kind of interesting. I wonder if they're probably going to try to tweak it down the line and see how many games you're going to play. Is it going to turn into like a series, a play-in series, like a 3-game series with some of these teams instead of just a one-and-done type of thing? But I understand Luka's point as a player saying, we fought through the pandemic. We're in this condensed schedule. We're jamming all these games in. We're fighting tooth and nail. We're trying to stay on the court. You see all these guys getting injured during the season. And then, the 7 and 8 teams, they technically earn a playoff seed, but then they might get knocked out because of 2 bad games. I totally understand where he's coming from. I still like the play-in tournament, though.
I think this is a way of like the NBA trying to drum up more fans and more excitement, which I'm not really sure why, because I think the NBA has still been on the rise recently over the last few years, especially in viewership, along with the NFL. We all still love it. It's one of the premier leagues. So I don't know why they're looking to kind of just, get more viewers or more dollars, I guess it comes down to it, and draw more excitement with bringing in a tournament before the tournament kind of thing. But I totally understand where Luka's coming from as a player. And Mark Cuban actually came out with a statement as well saying he does not support the idea. So backing his superstar player there. But I think this comes to show that, the Dallas Mavericks might fall into that section. And I think that's why they're kind of already voicing their opinion saying, hey, we might be that number 7 seed and we've kind of already secured our playoff spot, but now we're going to have to play in this play-in tournament to kind of secure our spot even more. So it's kind of tough. And I get it underneath the shortened season. But I think if you're the 9 and 10 seed after 70 games, then you don't belong in the playoffs, in my opinion. And I know, like I said, it's only like 12 games less, like we talked about. But I'm just going to have to go with the player here and being like, after 70 games, if you haven't put yourself into playoff contention, it's kind of hard to give you that extra bone to kind of give you another chance to knock out somebody that maybe even have a record, maybe 8 or 10 games better than you. So I totally understand where Luka's coming from and Mark Cuban as well. And I think this is something, like I said, maybe I'd like to see Major League Baseball come up with something more like this where they're trying to draw more excitement or change the game to draw more viewers, because I feel like Major League Baseball is the league right now that is slacking and falling and needs something like this to draw more attention to it. So I'm just shocked that the NBA is kind of doing something like this. I'm going to watch it and we'll kind of see how it plays out. But I totally understand where Luka's coming from.
Yeah, no, that's a good point with Major League Baseball. They have that one game playoff for those last 2 playoff teams to get into the sort of traditional playoff format. And I think you're right. I think they could expand it a little bit more because they have the least amount of playoff teams that get in as compared to the rest of the pro sports league. So that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that they were thinking, on top of possibly trying to make a little bit more money, is that sometimes you have these young teams that, struggle in the beginning, and then, like a Memphis last year who almost made it into the postseason. You have a Jamal Murray who everybody's excited to watch. And they get to a point where they would be a fun playoff team in that 1-8 matchup where, the 1-8 matchup in the NBA always seems to be, it goes in like 5 games. It's usually 4-1, and it's kind of boring. So I think they're trying to look for new ways to kind of spice that up a little bit. But I understand this season it is tough for these players, especially with the condensed schedule and everything that they got going on. So I totally understand Luka's frustration. We're going to shift now to golf, as of course we just had the Masters over the weekend. A lot's happened since the Masters, but we'll definitely talk about my favorite PGA Tour event of the year, the Masters. A lot of people love the Masters. It was finally back in April this year, when you could see the azaleas blooming and you could see all the scenery. It felt like the Masters again. When we saw Hideki Matsuyama become the first male Asian golfer to win a major on the PGA Tour. This is certainly going to be huge for the game of golf. And huge for the business of golf over the next few years, with Matsuyama now a major winner. Brennan, this is huge for the game of golf across the globe, especially.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about first him winning the Masters, but also what this does for the game and what this does for Matsuyama's legacy. And I think it's really one of those things where I think a lot of us expected this out of this kid, and he's really one of those up and coming stars. And it was just like, hey, when is he going to get it done? When is he going to win in that big one? When is he going to win a major? And he finally got it done on one of the biggest stages at the Masters this year. So I think it's one of those things where if you follow golf, this is a guy that's been on the radar for a while, is, like I said, been that young up-and-coming star, and we've all been watching him. He's just really been developing, and he's been developing fast too. And so it's really good to see and good to see for the game of golf to help out. And yeah, like we said, I think this is even going to draw more attention, especially from Japan. And we're talking about a country that routinely produces world-class talent in almost every sport we're talking about. And I think sometimes as a country, they fly under the radar, but this is helping to put them on the map even more, winning the Masters and having the first male Asian superstar win the Masters and having it be from the country of Japan. But like I said, Matsuyama, a great player. I've always enjoyed watching his game and watching him develop. And like I said, I really thought this was going to happen. And so this was not a shock to me. Really excited to see him win. And this could even trigger more wins coming down the line because he's that type of player where I think really once he gets it going, he starts to play really good in a lot of tournaments. And I think he's also one of those guys that plays really well in majors. You've kind of always seen him playing good in the U.S. Open, playing good in the Masters, playing good in the PGA Championship, and even playing good in the fifth major, TPC Sawgrass, which is one of my favorite tournaments down in Florida in Jacksonville. So yeah, I think this is just something, like I said, if you're a golf fan and you've been having your eye on this kid, you're not shocked at all. But if you're not a golf fan, hey, time to jump on the train and get on the Matsuyama train because this kid is legit and he's going to be here for years to come. And like I said, it would not shock me if he were to chain together at least one more major this year on top of this.
Yeah, I think the PGA is happy that something like this happened where it's a new star, and essentially bringing a whole new nation, into the PGA Tour, because this year's Masters was kind of boring. I mean, the fourth round, it was like, the course was so tough this year that a lot of guys struggled, and Jordan Spieth almost kind of made a run, but then, had a few mishaps. Jon Rahm had an awesome fourth round, but he was so far back that he was never really going to get to Matsuyama. But you're right. This is Ichiro Suzuki was not the first Japanese player to play in Major League Baseball, but he brought Japan over to Major League Baseball. I mean, it was a phenomenon when he started, becoming a superstar in Major League Baseball. So I think that's sort of what's going to happen here. Matsuyama, I remember hearing on one of the podcasts I was listening to that Matsuyama had so much media that would follow him around because it was all this media from Japan. And every major tournament, they'd send 20, the country's top, media outlets would send 20 people to a major, and they wouldn't even want to talk to Tiger Woods or Dustin Johnson or anybody. They just want to find out where Hideki Matsuyama was. So he had so much pressure on him to win that first major. So now that he's won a major, all that pressure's off. He's done it. He's going to have all this fanfare, and he's a really good player. I mean, you mentioned it. He's been in top 10 finishes in the majors, in the bigger tournaments like the Players and some of the other tournaments. And now it looks like he's going to take off. The guy's got such a good ball striker. And once you have that confidence in golf, then you can kind of go on a run in big tournaments and majors. But the business that's going to help with the PGA Tour, this is going to help for the PGA Tour, is going to be astronomical. I mean, there were people this week talking about how, this could be billions of dollars made off of him becoming a superstar. And a lot of golf experts thought that he was going to be one of those types of players anyway. I know Jack Nicklaus even mentioned that this kid Matsuyama is going to be, before this even happened, he mentioned how Matsuyama is going to be one of the top players, young players in the PGA Tour. So it was a long time coming. But he's finally arrived, and he's joined now a whole slew of like guys like 30 and under on the PGA Tour who are superstars. You know, this is what Tiger Woods has done to the game. All these guys grew up watching Tiger, and now all these young guys who are in great shape and who know how to swing, are these unbelievable golfers that are going to be fighting tooth and nail for majors every single season.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Japan treats their superstars like rock stars over there. They love them and they want to know what they're doing 24/7. So they always have some media from Japan following them around no matter where they go. And I'm sure Ichiro really was the one, like you said, the rock star of them all that really had the most media following him around. But you might see Matsuyama start to have a following like that soon. And another guy that I like to throw out there is Yuki Tsunoda in F1. He's really new to F1, rookie in F1, but also from Japan and looking to be a superstar. And so they really just treat their superstars like rock stars over there. But he really got to just kind of coast home on Sunday. Nobody really put too much pressure on him. Xander Schauffele was there for a few holes, and I think it was on the 15th or the 16th, had a triple bogey that kind of just really threw him off. And at one point, Matsuyama had a bogey as well over the last few holes, but his lead was so big, it kind of didn't matter. He could have that mistake and still cruise home to the victory. And I think he kind of knew it at that point. He had done so well over the last 3 rounds that Sunday was kind of like the victory lap where he kind of just had a par out. And that's basically what he did throughout the round. Like I said, Xander Schauffele tried to make a run, and Jordan Spieth tried to make a run. They just didn't have enough. And we talked about Jordan Spieth coming off that Valero Texas Open that he was going to play good, and we were right. He did play good. He just didn't have enough to beat Matsuyama, who ended up taking the title, rightly deserved. So, yeah, we'll have our eyes on Matsuyama going forward, and if you're a viewer out there, you should too. Topic number 4 going on, and we're going on to, unfortunately, the games being halted in Minnesota, unfortunately, due to another unarmed black man being shot by police in Minnesota. Daunte Wright sadly losing his life in an incident that is just sadly gone on too often, and we need to see it stop. I don't know what to say, really.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're just getting used to this, which is, it's almost like school shootings. It's getting to the point where, we're like, oh, another one, and I'm sure a lot of, the NBA has always been the league that's really, come to the forefront on this because of the amount of African-American players who are in the NBA, especially the superstars. It's LeBron, it's, Giannis, it's, the Celtics. We've heard a lot from Jason Tatum and especially Jaylen Brown, very smart guy, very politically savvy and active in the community. And, you could see it on Doc Rivers' face, on, I think it was Monday night when everybody kind of started commenting on it because the incident happened on Sunday. And, people are just tired of it. We're dealing through this pandemic. We certainly had the George Floyd incident last year. And then less than a year later, we have this, we have, several others. And it's just, and these folks are just sick of it, and you saw, when these sports leagues, either postpone games or change things for games, it starts to hit a broader audience too, I think. So I think one thing that happened in Minnesota what happened was the Timberwolves, the Wild, and the Twins all postponed their games for the day. They didn't play on Monday. And that made sense for 2 reasons. One, logistically, there are riots going on in Minnesota. So, you don't want to bring, even though these arenas are only allowing a certain amount of fans, you still don't want to bring those big groups of people to these arenas, while this other stuff is going on. And, it's better to just kind of have people stay home and figure this out another time. And then on top of that, just out of respect for the victim and his family, and then also saying like, this is still a big deal. Like we're still trying to not get over the George Floyd incident because now Chauvin's trial is going on. But, it's just another reminder to sports fans. Hey, I know that sports is an outlet for you. And we talked about it last week, how, some folks just want to escape the everyday life because everything's very stressful right now. And just for 2 or 3 hours and watch sports, which I totally understand. But sports is such an integral part of our society now that sports is going to have an effect on these types of issues. So, when the three sports teams in Minnesota postponed their games, I think, again, it brought more attention to what happened. And you're seeing what sports can do in these types of situations that happen in our society. Sports can have a big impact. And we saw it on Monday.
Yeah, for those people that would say, keep politics out of sports, I would argue with them that politics has always been in sports from the start, so that they don't know their history and that they need to look back, because politics and sports have been hand in hand since the beginning. Sports are global, politics are global, human rights issues are global. And so that's just how it is. And you have athletes that'll stand up and use their platform to speak on it. And I certainly appreciate it. And we've seen all athletes from LeBron James to Lewis Hamilton speaking up this year. And hopefully some more will be speaking up. But I think it's just one of those things where, sadly, yeah, we've seen it happen too often and it needs to stop. And I was talking the other day about how I support police, and I'm a huge supporter of the police, but I'm a huge supporter of police reform at this point as well. And I think something needs to change and something needs to be done now at this point to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. But I think I saw on the Twitterverse, as I call it, the Twitterverse today, that we were talking, people were reminding us that, in 1992, when there were the 92 LA riots, that, sports didn't really respond at that point. Sports really didn't blink an eye and kind of kept things rolling in response to, police brutality in 1992. But now we're seeing here in 2020 and 2021 that the sports world has changed a lot, and it's now reacting, and you're seeing athletes speaking up, and you're seeing games be postponed or even canceled. And that's in direct response to some of these things that are happening in our community. And we've always said that, sports is a huge part of the community and it's a huge part of our lives. So, we have to have responses from sports when certain things like this happen. And I know so many people don't like it, but it's just one of those things where you've got to understand it's going to happen. Unfortunately, like some of these incidents will happen. But I think it's good to see that, like I said, some of these athletes using their platform to speak up and use it for the right thing and to help people out and to speak up on human rights issues. Because I think a lot of people kind of mix up politics with human rights issues, and most of these things are human rights issues. So we're talking about people, and we're talking about people's lives. We're not talking about, left or right or red or blue. We're talking about, people's lives. So I think it's just something that hopefully we'll have change here going forward. But yeah, it didn't shock me to see that these games being postponed or halted in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think also, like I mentioned, the Derek Chauvin trials going on at, when this happened, and Minnesota's just in, such a strange time. I don't even know if strange is the right word, but they I'm sure the sports teams were like, man, we just can't do this today. I'm sure some of the players were saying, like, you get socked over the head with more news that another African-American was shot, by a cop, and you're just like, I know what had happened in the NBA bubble, that players were just like, I can't play today, because of this. So, it made total sense what those teams did, and like I said, I think it brought a lot more attention to it on top of the attention that it was already getting. Moving on to our next topic, and we've talked before about equity for women in sports, and Meghan Rapinoe, I'm sorry, has been one of the female athletes at the forefront of looking for equal pay and equal or just equity overall. I remember at the Women's World Cup, we found out that the women weren't getting paid as much as the men, and this sort of thing. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but and that's when this really kind of came about. And then Draymond Green kind of responded and saying, women should pay more attention about growing their sport rather than about how much they get paid, this sort of thing. I think I kind of know what Draymond Green was saying, Brandon, but he certainly didn't say it the right way. So, what do you think about what's going on with Draymond Green and Meghan Rapinoe?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think and Draymond he doesn't choose his words wisely a lot. I love Draymond. I love Draymond, honestly, maybe because of that, because he doesn't have much of a filter. He kind of just lets you know how he's feeling and what he's thinking. I certainly loved his battles with Charles Barkley. I'd love to see another one of those coming up. But yeah, Draymond's one of those guys. He's going to let you know how it feels without the filter. And I've got to agree with him. And I know that's going to piss off a lot of viewers. But I'm all for equity and I'm all for equality. But when we're talking about this is sports entertainment, right? And it's a business. Where does the money come from to pay the women athletes? That's my only question. And especially for Meghan Rapinoe, where does the income come to be able to boost your pay to $1 million or over $1 million? Because there's just people aren't watching the games. People aren't watching the games. People aren't buying the jerseys. People aren't buying the hats. Does this look like it's a woman's jersey? It's not a woman's jersey. So it's just one of those things where, unfortunately, there's no income to be able to back up pay like that. And we've talked about it on these shows in the past, right? About how the modern day athlete is overpaid. I've even been the one to say it, right? And we've talked about supply and demand is really the thing that's driven it up. And it's like, obviously like a guy like Barry Sanders wasn't getting his paid as much as like a guy like, I don't know, like James White. I bet James White might be making more money than Barry Sanders. Yeah. Maybe not, but I don't know. But you get what I'm saying? It's just the difference of the time there and how much money is involved in sports now. So I think, hey, Meghan Rapinoe, I'm all for you trying to go for it and trying to get paid more money. I want to get paid more money. We all want to get paid more money. But where does the money come from, especially when we're talking about women's sports? People don't watch the WNBA. People don't watch women's soccer. Like I said, I'm nobody's going and buying that Meghan Rapinoe jersey. I haven't seen a Meghan Rapinoe jersey out there. So I've seen Draymond Green jerseys. I've seen a lot of Draymond Green jerseys. So it's just one of those things where I think it's a numbers thing right now. I'm all for women getting paid. Like, hey, if this is we're talking about like a woman doctor at Johnson & Johnson and a male doctor at Johnson & Johnson, right? They should be getting paid the exact same amount of money. But we're talking about professional sports where there's a different amount of income and revenue involved. So there's just not any money or enough money to be able to pay them the money that they want. I'm sorry, there's just not.
Yeah, I think there's two sort of avenues in this topic that can satisfy kind of both sides. The side that would satisfy what Meghan Rapinoe is really talking about is when you're a World Cup team and you go to the World Cup as the U.S. soccer organization, funds everything, funds your hotels and travel and meals and whatever, and the players get paid. Both the men and women are going to the World Cup, and this is what they get paid. And that part of it, it's I kind of understand. Like they kind of probably should get paid the same amount, and then if a team wins, they get more, and so forth. That I could see. We saw it in the NCAA tournament. This is a nonprofit talking about the NCAA who should make sure that both the men and women get equal treatment. The men's tournament's going to get more attention. It's going to get more money because the advertisers and people watching on TV. But the things that you can control, you really can't control how many people watch sports on TV. It's if they want to watch, they're going to watch. If they don't want to watch, they're not going to. But and of course you can do better advertising and promotional stuff. But at the end of the day, there's going to be right now more people watch, the NBA than women's soccer. So I think there's a difference between the governing body or the governing organization of a sport not paying, the men's and women's teams equally, or treating them equally, or making sure that they both have equal, settings and things and resources and things like that, and salaries in individual leagues. If Meghan Rapinoe played in the women's professional soccer league in America, she's they're not going to make as much money as the men in the MLS because they don't play in as big of venues. They don't sell out as many tickets. They don't sell the TV advertising and so forth. If you look at like women's tennis is very popular. I actually would rather watch Serena Williams and Osaka, go at it than men's tennis. And I think that you see that. I think you see women's tennis it took them a little while to finally get paid equal at Wimbledon and some of the other Grand Slams. But I believe the pay is equal between men and women there because you're essentially playing in the same tournament. You've got the same coverage. You've got everything the same as far as men and women. So that's why they can get the equal pay there. The two different leagues, it's almost like you got to look at two different businesses, right? Let's say you've got Bank of America and Draymond Green works for Bank of America and Meghan Rapinoe works for a smaller local bank. And Bank of America's salaries of their employees are probably higher because they just make more money. And so they can pay their employees better. I think that's the difference between the two leagues. So, I think the way that you look at it is the governing body needs to treat everybody the same, but the individual leagues, have certain revenue points and they can pay their players what the market decides. And that's the difference there.
Yeah, I think more to back up your point, I agree with the national team thing. I think if it comes down to the national team, you're representing your country, it's all on the same playing field, whether it be at the Olympics or the World Cup. I think that they, should have a set pay and it should be the same as the men. But when it comes to the individual leagues, like we're talking about, whether it be MLS or women's Major League Soccer, then there's just different revenue gaps and different revenue that's brought into play. And that's really what ends up deciding the length and the dollar amount that's bought into the players' contracts. And I think Meghan Rapinoe should kind of do like a few of her counterparts on the national team have done. They go and play in Europe. They go and play in Europe and they go and play in the women's leagues in Europe because in Europe they get paid a lot more money in women's soccer to play professionally. We've seen at least 3 or 4 women that have been on the national team over the last few years go and play professional soccer in the UK or in Ireland because they're getting paid a lot more money. And that's because it generates more revenue in Europe compared to the United States. So I just think it's one of those things where I'm all for equity. We don't want to lose any women viewers out there. Please don't think we're saying anything bad here. I just can't figure out where the money would come from as far as the leagues and stuff. And it's an X's and O's thing, and it's a numbers thing, it's a mathematics thing, and I just can't find the money no matter where I look as far as the leagues go. So I'm sure it's something that we'll have some comments to deal with next week and maybe get some blowback, but we'll talk about it going more on the show going forward and on future episodes. But moving on to topic number 6, which is a big topic for us here in New England with the UMass hockey team coming out of nowhere, baby, bringing home the national title. And I shouldn't say out of nowhere. They've had a good program over the years, but traditionally you're seeing teams like, like a Minnesota or a North Dakota just dominating the Frozen Four over the last few years. But here we are, man, putting UMass on the map here. UMass men's hockey winning the national title. What do you think about it, Pat?
Yeah, this was pretty cool. And this is coming from a former Northeastern Husky, not on the hockey team. I just went to Northeastern. Hockey East, and, during the regular season, you hate all the Hockey East teams. But then kind of once they get to like the Frozen Four, unless it's BC or BU, which I will never root for them. Even though, well, let me walk that back. My wife works at BU, so I'm going to root for BU because of that. Because, some of the money's coming into the household, so I got to make sure I root for BU.
Good call.
But BC, no thanks. But yeah, I mean, this was really cool. And to see UMass, my sister went to UMass, my cousin went to UMass. There's a lot of people we know that went to UMass, and even if you went to UMass Dartmouth or UMass Boston, one of the other University of Massachusetts schools, you're loving this. You're probably celebrating too. So this was pretty cool. And you got to look back too, is that, as soon as their coach got there, Coach Carvel, his first season, they only won 5 games in 2017. So, the program has come such a long way. And if folks watched the game and saw the head coach, at the end when they were interviewing him right before the trophy presentation, and he couldn't get out of there fast enough because he wanted to go take pictures with his players instead of doing an interview. But he was just saying like this. He was very emotional. He was saying this program has come such a long way, and he was talking about his players, and you can see he went from 5 games to 17 games, 17 wins to 31 wins to 21 wins in the pandemic shortened season, and then this past year he had 20 wins in another pandemic shortened season. They won the national championship. So, once a coach gets in there, it takes a year or two in college to at least get your players in that you want, because that's when you can really start recruiting. And now you're seeing those first couple of classes that he recruited are now probably juniors and seniors, and he's seeing the fruits of that labor. So, this was awesome for UMass. They beat Minnesota Duluth in the Frozen Four game to get to the national championship, and that's a team they lost in the national championship to in 2019. So that probably made it even sweeter. Not having a national championship last year, and UMass probably feeling like we were going to have a great season last year again, and then it got cut short because of the pandemic. To win it this year, that had to be an awesome feeling for those guys, and just really cool as Massachusetts residents to see UMass on the national stage again.
Yeah, no, this is, I think, huge for the school, huge for the program, huge for the state. So just big across the board here. And I think this is one of those things where it's huge for New England. I think even if you're from maybe Connecticut or Vermont or something, unless you're rooting for the Vermont, Catamounts there, that, this is big, for UMass and for the area. And it was good to see. And if you're not from the Northeast, then you probably don't know how big hockey is up here and how much people love their hockey. And honestly, up here in the Northeast, it's hockey and basketball are pretty much number 1 and number 2 as far as what people really love to watch and get themselves like deep dive into. Football is, slowly attacking its way up there and attacking its way. But, in the Northeast here, hockey is a big deal. It's a big fighter here. And so to see UMass come out and flex their might and win the national title is huge. And like you said, beating a team that had beaten them in the past is sending a message that, hey, we've gone and we've developed and we've taken our weaknesses and now we've turned them into strengths. And here we are beating you. And like I said, Minnesota Duluth is one of those teams that is generally in the Final Four a lot. So yeah, like I said, so it's one of those things where you're beating kind of like the UConn of women's basketball. You're beating one of those dynasties to go ahead and claim yourself a national title. So I think it's huge, like I said, for the school, huge even for the sport. I think it's bringing more eyes to the sport, having UMass be a new national title winner and bring some more eyes to the sport and some more excitement. But yeah, I was watching them, I follow the football coach. So he was tweeting out, seeing them come home and bringing the trophy home to the school. A lot of students turned out there. Obviously, it was good to see people wearing a mask, but still a lot of people there turning out to see their national title come home to Amherst where it belongs. So it's good to see. And while we're talking about the, Frozen Four, because we might not talk about it much on this show, the Frozen Four, I wish I told producer Ben to talk about it, but they have this tournament inside the tournament where it's the haircuts and the mustaches of the players. Because, these hockey players have some crazy haircuts and mustaches. Oh, yeah. So it's kind of like, a round of 64 to see who has the coolest, mullet or mustache combination in the Frozen Four. So I didn't get to see who won that bracket. I'll have to look back to see who won that hair bracket. But really good to see UMass bring the national title home to back to Massachusetts.
Yeah, there was a kid on UMass that had the Joe Dirt hair, no question. He might have won the bracket. I didn't see some of the other players without their helmets off, so it's tough to see. But we'll see who won that one. But yeah, very cool for UMass. They haven't been their athletics. None of their athletic programs have been that relevant since the Refuse to Lose basketball team with Marcus Camby. Yep. When John Calipari was the head coach, Carmelo Travieso, and so forth. And I think I even saw Carmelo Travieso tweet something out about the UMass hockey team. So all these UMass people, there is a UMass following because it's the big state school in Massachusetts. So many people went there, and it's a big school. And when a school like that wins a title, it just seems even sweeter because it's more of the common folk that are UMass fans. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, it's been almost 25 years now since UMass's sports programs were this relevant on a national stage. So very cool.
Agreed.
Staying on the ice, but moving to the NHL, the Bruins make a big trade, and actually I think they made out in the deal, making a trade with the Buffalo Sabres and picking up Taylor Hall. A big wing for this Bruins team. He can score, he can handle the puck, brings some physicality, a very talented player over the years, actually won the MVP a few years ago. His game has dropped off a little bit, but Bruins picking him up is huge, Brandon.
Yeah, I think this is a huge move, bringing in Hall, bringing in a player that can get it done and can help out several lines depending on where you want to play him. But yeah, I honestly was shocked though, because I mean, Buffalo is really one of our rivals. So it's really one of those things where seeing two rival teams trade with each other would kind of be like seeing the Patriots trade with the Dolphins. And it's just you don't rarely see that happen. So I think this was a big move. And obviously it was a move that fit for both teams because it happened. But I think it was one of those things too, where they were available to play immediately. And I think this just talks to, how fast they got the deal done, but also to these hockey players just being like, hey, just suit me up. I'm ready to go out there no matter what. Because, I mean, they were just ready to roll night one. I mean, they were practicing day one, available game one, ready to get out there on the ice. So I was extremely impressed with that. And, Boston, we love that as we're a tough city. We're not going to put up for losing. We're not going to put up for laying down. So to have this guy come out and just say, hey, that's how you gain fans in Boston, to say, I'm ready to play. I'm ready to play right now. I'm ready to play night one. And I love seeing how obviously our coach there, Bruce Cassidy, is saying these guys know that they're coming into an organization that they know doesn't accept losing. This is a city that doesn't accept losing. We've got to get back to championship level. And hopefully these are the guys that can help us do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in 2010, Taylor Hall was drafted number 1 overall by, I believe, Edmonton. And then the Bruins, number 2 overall, drafted Tyler Seguin. And everybody, both players were considered the 2 top players, and it was just a matter of who's going to get, who Edmonton was going to take 1, and then the Bruins were going to take whoever wasn't taken first overall at number 2. But the funny thing is, a lot of hockey experts were saying, the Bruins really needed more of a winger, which is what Taylor Hall is, and the Edmonton Oilers needed more of a center, which is what Tyler Seguin really was. He ended up playing on the wing for the Bruins. He was a forward for the Bruins, but was kind of more of a center and more of a facilitator. But so now the Bruins finally get Taylor Hall 10 years later. So very interesting. You bring a guy who can really skate too, and I know that the Bruins have a good amount of players who are sort of getting towards not the end of their careers, but are almost close to the back nine, should we say, with Bergeron, David Krejci, still very good. But those guys are also more like facilitators as well. You bring in a little bit more talent on the offensive end, a guy who can really handle the puck, who can skate, who can shoot, and a guy with some size on the wing. I mean, the Bruins, they used to be the big bad Bruins when they had Lucic and a few other guys when they won the Cup in 2011. So now, they bring in a Taylor Hall to bring some more size back in, but also some skill and some speed. And I think it's really going to help this team. He actually, his game the other night, he didn't score, but he set up some plays where some guys were able to score. So he didn't get a hockey assist, but he almost had a hockey assist a couple of times the other night. So he's going to be big for the Bruins. It's a guy that they've been talking about for, I think, all season long. Everybody keeps saying, the Bruins are going to get Taylor Hall, and then people were thinking that the Bruins were going to get Jack Eichel. He played over at Boston University and then went to the Sabres a couple of years ago. Eichel, they actually just announced today, is out for the season. I think the Sabres also shut down Ben Bishop and a couple other players today. So I think the Sabres are kind of packing it in. They're like, okay, we're not going to win anything this year. We're done. That's why they gave up Taylor Hall. But this is huge for the Bruins. I think this is a big move, and this is gonna help them. In a season like this where things are kind of all over the place, you had some COVID issues. Tuukka Rask was out for a little while. You bring a guy like Taylor Hall, and it kind of gives you a little bit of juice during the middle of the season as you're trying to gear up, get a good seed, and make a playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where hockey is one of those games where you can impact the game and still have a great game without scoring a point. And so I think he came in the other night and still had a really good game, helped the team get a W and play really well. Like you said, he didn't score a point, but he still helped and that to get us over the top and get a win. And I think that's really what he's been brought in for. And more to your point, with aging players like a Bergeron or a Marchand or a Krejci, I think it's time to win. It's time to win now. And so they needed a little bit more help, like you said, more of like a guy that's going to come in and help secure up some of the lines and maybe play that enforcer role a little bit, bring a little bit more physicality to our lines. And so I think this is what it does. And so I don't know, but it's time to win. And I think this is the move that it's saying. It's time to win now for the Bruins, whether it's this year or next year. I think they really have to make a push to get another cup into the city. And hopefully this is a move that's going to help them do it. But moving on to topic number 8, and we're talking about the esports explosion and really how esports is really blown up across the globe. And we're talking across a bunch of different platforms and a bunch of different sports and a bunch of different markets. And I mean, it is really blowing up. If you haven't gotten your eyes on esports or an esports tournament or an esports race or game, I would suggest checking it out because they're pretty exciting and these guys are pretty skilled.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we continue here, folks, make sure, number one, you look at the bottom of the screen right there. That's where our Twitter handles are. Make sure you follow Brandon and I on Twitter as we post a lot of stuff from the Comeback Sports content. And also we post out the link every week. And also make sure when you're on YouTube, including right now, if you're watching this show, subscribe to the Comeback Sports YouTube channel. And we'll make sure we'll give you a shout out once we see that you have subscribed to our show. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, it makes sense to now with what's going on with the pandemic where everybody's got to stay inside and everybody's doing everything on Zoom. Everybody's doing everything online. And, now it's, esports has been growing even before the pandemic, but it's kind of had this big upswing because of it too. And even though the esports tournaments are in, like convention centers and facilities where people can watch and check it out. It's almost like they have crowds for the esports tournaments. And even though they're not doing that right now, everybody's doing it remotely. It's just naturally a sort of remote activity. So I think it makes total sense that it's blowing up. I'm not totally into it, but I understand why people are, and it makes total sense. You see the Crafts that actually invested in an esports team here in New England, Boston Uprising. They're in that Overwatch league, which I think is the most popular league with the esports. So if the Crafts, who have obviously invested in the Patriots, know a winner when they see one, they've invested in the Revs, who have had a nice run over the past couple decades, and now they invest in an esports team. It's got to be a good investment. They know what they're doing. So it makes total sense that this sport is blowing up right now.
And yeah, they're jumping in because the money's coming in. The money's starting to get dumped into esports right now. And so all the big players are realizing like now is the time to get in, whether or not you're, supporting a player or an esports athlete or an esports driver, or you're owning one of these esports teams. Now is the time to get in because it's really blowing up across the globe and especially here in the United States. And I think the pandemic was one of those things that just helped drive it. It was one of those things that was already here and it was already developing. But with, like you said, everybody being at home, now was the time for esports really to take over. And they did. They really showed up. I mean, you had even real athletes at home playing these games and streaming them online for people to watch in all-star tournaments or all-star races. So it's really one of those things where it doesn't shock me that the Kraft family jumped in and bought an esports team. The Boston Celtics also have an esports team that participates in the NBA 2K League. So NBA 2K League is one of those things that helped, really bring esports to the forefront. And we're starting to see that even grow itself. The NBA 2K League is growing, but there's, like I said, there's NBA 2K League, there's the Madden tournaments, there's the F1 esports races, there's iRacing, which brings you the Porsche Cup. It also brings you the IMSA Championship. It also brings you the Indy Pro Car, or just last night, they had the Coca-Cola iRacing 600, which is a NASCAR race. So it's really one of those things where it's blowing up. You're seeing it streamed on YouTube or on Twitch for millions of viewers across the globe. So yeah, it's just really one of those things where it's an exciting time to see something developing and to have something else to watch. And like I said, during the pandemic, when we didn't have real games to watch, occasionally we were turning on these esport events to basically fill our time and help out. And like I said, that just helped create more of a void for them to fill and to drive more excitement to esports. And they took full advantage of it. And it's really blowing up. So it's really one of those things that I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes more and if it continues to stay on this galactic rise.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest points you mentioned too was that the players now in these professional sports leagues play esports. So they're involved in video games and playing online and like you said, you saw it during the pandemic when nobody was doing anything. Players were going up against fans or going up against each other, and they were airing it on ESPN. It was just it was something to watch. There was nothing else on, and it was great programming for ESPN, and it was something the players could engage other players with. So that was pretty cool too, and it's only going to continue to grow, especially with what's going on now. With technology and everything like that, it's only going to continue to grow. So it makes total sense that it's on the upswing. Moving on to our topic number 9, and Brandon, you wore the jersey today. Tough day this week in New England for Patriots fans. Brandon, I'm going to let you kick this one off. Julian Edelman, hanging them up.
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of the best Patriots, in my opinion, to basically retire and walk away from the game. And we're talking about, in my opinion, one of the best Patriots of all time. And you see him wearing his jersey. He truly was my favorite Patriot of all time. And I mean that. Like, a lot of people would obviously bring up the GOAT, Tom Brady. But for me, it was Julian Edelman. I loved this guy. He was truly my favorite player. I was a huge Wes Welker fan, loved Wes Welker, was great out of the slot. And then Wes Welker, obviously, it was time for Wes Welker to move on. And people were going to say, hey, who's our replacement for this guy? Who's going to be the next Wes Welker? And I kept telling people, he's already on the roster. He's already on the roster. He was this young rookie coming out of Kent State, but I could see it. And obviously, Bill Belichick saw it too. This kid was just a football player, just a baller. Just get him the ball, get out of his way. He's that type of player, and he really developed into really one of the best receivers of all time, in my opinion, for the Patriots. And so, I mean, chalk it up for him being in the Patriots Hall of Fame. And in my opinion, he deserves a gold jacket to be in Canton. Okay, here's some numbers for you. 3-time Super Bowl champion, 2018 Super Bowl MVP, 620 receptions, almost 7,000 receiving yards, 41 TDs, all for a 7th-round draft pick, all right? A guy that came out of nowhere, a guy that flew under the radar, right? So, I mean, and to think, he made some of the biggest plays and some of the biggest moments, okay? Think about that touchdown catch against the Seahawks, where he runs that amazing whip route that puts us ahead in the game, or that amazing catch that he makes against Atlanta that puts us ahead in the game and for that Super Bowl. Or people will tend to forget that touchdown pass that he throws to Danny Amendola against the Ravens was really the game that drove us to win the Super Bowl that year. So, I mean, without this guy, the Patriots do not have as many Super Bowl rings and Super Bowl trophies as they do. So clearly, I mean, honestly, in my opinion, he should have more than 3 rings because he's that great of a player. But yeah, you got to put him with a red jacket into the Patriots Hall of Fame. And you got to, in my opinion, put him in with a gold jacket into Canton, into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Honestly, second all time in the playoffs to only Jerry Rice when it comes to receptions, yards, touchdowns. So if anybody wants to argue that he doesn't belong in Canton, that is even arguable enough for me right there, that he is one of the biggest clutch receivers in NFL playoff history and in NFL Super Bowl history, that's why he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Like I said, just second in the numbers behind Jerry Rice, who's also a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And we're talking about one of these guys, a tough guy, a guy that can just give you miles after miles. And even in his video, he said he was going to play until the wheels fall off. And unfortunately, they've fallen off with a big knee injury. And we all know, like we were just talking about, even with Jamal Murray, a knee injury is tough to come back from. And when you're later on in your career, it's even more tough to come back from. And I know, guys, you know, producer Ben's putting up the Tampa Bay and Gronk, but I'm going to have to disagree with everybody talking about how he's going to go down to Tampa Bay. I think he was serious when he came out with this video that he was retiring and Foxborough forever, because I don't think you're going to see this guy put on another uniform. And I think he really is hanging it up, and it's because of that knee injury. It's a very serious knee injury. Reports over the last week have been coming out that it wasn't going to be rehabbed enough to be able to play, or it was going to be one of those things where he was going to re-injure it. So it's just better off for Julian, for him to walk away from the game right now where he still can. He can still walk away from the game and go and do something else, because this guy is, like I said, he's the light of football. I love this guy. That's why I keep going on him, Pat, because I love this guy. Like I said, one of my favorite players of all time. And hey, Julian Edelman, bring back the show Burger Time. If you guys, any other Edelman fans, remember, he used to do a social media show called Burger Time where he'd bring on guests like James White or Tom Brady or Gronk or like David Andrews, and he would talk to his Patriots teammates, and they would joke around. They test out different burgers and stuff. So, hey, Julian, now's the time to bring back Burger Time. But personally, Julian, as a fan of the game and as a Patriots fan and as one of your biggest fans, thank you for the 12 years that you gave us here in Foxborough, and for those 3 Super Bowls, and for all those amazing moments that I know I certainly will not forget. Thank you, Jules. Thank you.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable for the Patriots over these last few years. I love the sign, man. Love the sign. You mixed in some color there at the bottom. Nice job. Yeah, I mean, I think he'll definitely be in the Patriots Hall of Fame. Surefire, first ballot, Patriots Hall of Famer. I think it is a borderline case as to whether or not he should be in the NFL Hall of Fame, but I think he should be in. You mentioned the playoff statistics, and like you said, only Jerry Rice was ahead of him in a lot of those statistics. But even like some of the seasons that he had when he was in his prime, 2013 was really his breakout year, 105 catches, well over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2014, the year they win the Super Bowl against Seattle, 92 catches, 972 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2016, 98 catches, over 1,100 yards, 3 touchdowns. 2017, got banged up a little bit, missed a few games, but still 74 catches, 850 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2019, 100 catches, over 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. So you have 2 seasons where he goes over 100 catches. You have 2 more seasons where he goes over 90 catches. He has 74 catches in an injury-shortened season. Then he had 2015 where he got injured, midway through the year. I think he got such a late start because he was kind of sitting behind Welker and Moss and Dante Stallworth for a little while. And then, of course, the Pats brought in Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. So they had all these weapons, but Edelman just kind of kept hanging around. Finally really got a shot in 2013, and you saw what he did with it. So, yeah, I think he should go into, there's a lot of people that argue, New York fans are going to argue that Eli Manning should be in. I don't agree with that. But if you're saying Eli Manning should be in, then Julian Edelman should be in, because you're using almost the same reasoning as far as being clutch in the postseason. And I would even argue more that Edelman's had better overall performances in the postseason, not just a couple of throws that, were great throws, but they weren't, an entire game of a performance. So I think Edelman should be in. He's not going to Tampa Bay. From all the Patriots beat writers, I heard Greg Bedard on a podcast in Boston Sports Journal where he was saying, like, it's a bone-on-bone knee situation. And even if he tried to come back, he would never be able to play 16 games. He might not even get through half the season. So, they were talking about it on Greg Bedard's podcast, how, you feel bad for Edelman that he couldn't walk off the field with a bunch of fans this past year for his last game. But at the same time, he's walking away. He's not limping away. He's not, it's not like he just was one of those athletes that hung on too long with a really serious injury and maybe got one too many concussions, or you start to worry about the long-term effects. He's doing it the right way, and it's sad to see him go, but he's got all these accomplishments. He's got 3 rings, and hats off to his amazing career.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up all those numbers. 100 was like the target for him, right? Every year it was like 100 was the target. And if he got close to that, then you knew he was having himself a really good year. And for all you viewers out there, 100 catches is nothing to joke about in the NFL. I mean, you generally have guys that might have under 10 catches or might have 40 or 50 catches. So to get almost 100 catches and to have that be routine is huge. But we're also forgetting about, like I said, the touchdown passes that this guy threw a bunch of touchdown passes, ran a bunch of touchdowns in, also made a bunch of tackles on special teams. So I think it just goes to more about how Bill Belichick called him the ultimate competitor. And
he played defensive back too.
Yeah, played some defensive back and made some defensive back plays, like kind of like Troy Brown used to do for us. But it's just one of those things. He's just a football player, and obviously he played quarterback at Kent State. But when he came here, it was well known that Bill Belichick said, hey, we're drafting you because you're a football player and we know you can do many things. And that's exactly what he did over his career of 12 years for the Patriots. And what a great player. And like I said, he's definitely going to go on to do bigger things, I think, even off the football field, because he brings such charisma and carries so many fans still with him that I think this is not the last you've heard of Julian Edelman. I think we're expecting to see just what's next for Julian Edelman. But once again, Jules, thank you for a great career here. And I know Pats Nation will be grateful forever. So thank you, Jules. Moving on to topic number 10. And this is a fight. I called it, man. I called it. Go back to the show weeks ago. I told you that they were just jockeying to have a trilogy fight and that there would be a third fight, and that McGregor was kind of just, jockeying himself into position to get paid for this third fight. And here he's going to show up for it. I called it, man. I called it. Told you.
Yeah, you did. You absolutely did. And you're saying that McGregor rope-a-doped Poirer into this third fight. You might be right. But McGregor mentioned, the big Twitter war or social media war that's going on now, or PR war between McGregor and Poirer, is that McGregor said that he would donate $500,000 to Poirier's gym in Lafayette, Louisiana. That's for disadvantaged youth in that area, which is an awesome charity. And I guess a lot of other UFC fighters have donated to that as well in the past. So it's a very well-known charity and gym that Poirier is putting together there. So McGregor said that he would donate the money after the fight. Fight happens. Poirer still hasn't seen the money, so I don't know what's going on with McGregor. McGregor's got so much money. I'm sure he'll do it, because it's just, he's been charitable in the past. So I guess he's been helping a lot of businesses, I think in Ireland, through the pandemic, which is great to hear. As crazy as McGregor can be, to hear him do things like that is awesome. So I'm sure he'll pay the money. But they've been going back and forth about the money, and honestly, it's to drum up noise and spark up interest in this fight. This fight is scheduled for July 10th. It's definitely going to happen. But so this little Twitter war, who knows how manufactured it is? It probably is, for the most part, manufactured to drum up interest. But that makes sense. That's why guys like this, when you're a UFC fighter, you're a boxer, with these pay-per-view type of sporting events, these individual fighters, they have to not just be, great fighters. The best fighters of all time were also great promoters and self-promoters, and they would draw up interest in fights. That's why Muhammad Ali is considered one of the best of all time. We talked about Marvin Hagler a few weeks ago, and he was certainly a guy that had charisma and brought up interest in a fight. So you talk about guys not just being good fighters, being feared in the ring, but also the way that they drum up attention to their fight. So I think that's what these guys are doing right now. This makes total sense. It's funny to see how they're doing it. It's interesting that they chose it this way, but this is definitely to bring attention to that fight on July 10th. Then McGregor said something like, "Oh, if Poirier is going to talk to me like that, I'm not going to fight." And then a couple days later on social media, he says, "I'm going to put a hurting on him," or something like that. So it means like he's obviously going to fight, but he's saying stuff like that to just create controversy, which again, it's theater for these guys. And that's why they make the big bucks in this sport.
Yeah, it's funny. He definitely said, like, all right, the fight's off. I'm not fighting anymore. And then 3 days later, Dana White's like, fight's confirmed, July 10th. So it's like definitely one of those things where they are just trying to drum up more pay-per-view and more eyes on this fight. And the more to your point, I think you're right. The best fighters are also the best promoters because they really have to promote their fight. The more eyes they get on there, the more tickets that are sold, the more pay-per-view that's sold, it just benefits them. Their contracts are generally built on percentages based off all those things, whether it be box office numbers or pay-per-view numbers. So you're right. They've got to promote themselves. And obviously Conor McGregor is really one of the best promoters of himself. We've obviously talked about that in the past. And I'm going to toot my own horn again and say, I called this. I knew that they were going to do this, and I knew they were setting it up for a trilogy fight. And I honestly called a few shows ago also that McGregor's going to beat him this time. I said McGregor's going to beat him. I think McGregor is going to figure it out. And even McGregor told him on Twitter, he said, you can bring those little kicks again. I've got everything to defend those little kicks and box those little kicks. But we're going to stand in the middle of the ring and go toe-to-toe, and that's kind of where I'll be. Poirer responded saying he's going to be in the middle of the ring, but I still think Poirier is going to be trying to throw those check kicks to be able to get McGregor down. That's really what helped him in the first fight. But I think it's really one of those things. Yeah, producer Ben's showing that clip. Go back and watch it, guys. Go back and watch it, viewers. I called it. I called this fight. I called the trilogy fight, and like I said, I called McGregor that he's going to win it. And guess what? It's back in Big Fight City, right? It's back in Las Vegas, where all the lights are and where all the big money fights are in the world. We all know that. So I would love to get some tickets for this fight July 10th in Vegas, but I'd also be happy to watch it at home too. And I might have to do that because I'm really looking forward to seeing if McGregor can put his money where his mouth is. And to be honest, another thing where I was convinced that Twitter feud was kind of set up because McGregor called him a hillbilly. He called him a hillbilly like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, man, McGregor is really playing it up. So like people can get like interested in this fight even more. But honestly, I think just it being a trilogy fight is enough to really drum up to see who can get the best in this series of 3 fights. But like I said, I'm calling it. I'm calling McGregor. I'm not saying it's going to be a knockout. I'll have to think about that going forward and getting closer to fight night on that call. But I'm definitely predicting a Conor McGregor win.
Nice. Yeah. No, this is going to be great. I'm hoping too that with the pandemic going on, that there's a certain amount of fans that can be allowed in the arena. I would think by July, hopefully they can, even if they can just get like 50% capacity or something like that. Which I think is definitely achievable by the time this fight rolls around. That would be great. I'm even wondering if they could do something in Vegas outside, and have the fight outside at a big outdoor space in Vegas. That would be cool too. And then you wouldn't have to worry as much about the pandemic, especially at that point. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is going to be great. And again, these guys are doing a great job promoting this. And, this is how you use social media if you're an athlete to promote things like this. So very cool between those two guys.
Quickly, to your point, the MGM has a huge outdoor venue that they've used for boxing in the past.
Right.
So yeah, that's your point. That could be a great option. I'm not sure what venue it's at and if they've signed that yet, but yeah, that's a great point, Pat.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to have it outside, And you always worry about the weather, but the weather in Vegas is always dry, so I think it'd work out well. I don't know how the fighters like working, fighting outside in Vegas. It could be, July. It's going to be super hot, so the fight would be at nighttime, but it's still going to be super hot, so that might be an issue. But they can figure something out. It's Vegas. They have a lot of different venues. They have a lot of different ways to do things. So
cage fighting.
Drop something out. Exactly. Folks, that's going to do it for our show this week. Again, we went over a lot of different stuff, the Masters, UFC, and of course, our boy Julian Edelman retiring. Thank you, Julian, for your career here in New England. We're going to miss you. But again, if you want to follow us on social media, our links are at the bottom of the screen. Those are our Twitter handles. And again, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Comeback Sports. A lot of good stuff up there. Our producer, Ben Kudo's doing a great job cutting up different segments and posting them on our page. And also make sure you like us and jump in the chat, ask us questions. If you want to hear a question over during one of our shows, we'll make sure to drop your name in. If you don't want your name mentioned, but you still want to drop a question, do it anonymously. We don't have to say your name, so just let us know. Throw something in there. You can tweet at Brandon and I, and get involved, because we want this to be an open conversation here on Comeback Sports. There's still a lot going on here in April. You folks who know us already know that Brandon and I are psyched about the NFL draft coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to have a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks with that. But as always, there's always other stuff going on in sports as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun over the next few weeks here in April. But we're going to pack it up for now, folks. But we'll see you next time here on Comeback Sports. Have a good night, everybody.